Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my sister's life. Sarah was glowing. She looked like a goddamn angel in a custom designer dress that cost more than my first car. My parents had spared absolutely no expense, sinking $250,000 into this perfect day. We were at a luxury estate, white roses draped over every surface, and the finest champagne flowing like water. My parents were beaming, shaking hands with some of the most powerful CEOs and investors in the city. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. The groom was Mark, a high-flying corporate architect with a smile that could sell ice to an Eskimo. He treated Sarah like she was made of fine porcelain, and my parents worshipped the ground he walked on. But I always had this itch in the back of my mind. A gut feeling I couldn't shake. Something about the way he looked at our family estate and my father's company. It wasn't love. It was hunger. 10 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin, I realized I'd left the wedding rings in the groom's suite. I ran back, expecting to find Mark nervously adjusting his tie or taking a final shot of whiskey. But as I reached the heavy oak door, I realized it was ajar. And the conversation happening inside stopped me dead in my tracks. Is the offshore account set up? It was Mark's voice. But the warmth was gone. It was cold. Calculating. Clinical. Yeah, his best man, Jason replied. But Mark, are you sure about this? Sarah actually loves you, man. She thinks this is forever. I heard a dry, hollow laugh. A laugh that made my blood run cold. Huh? Don't be pathetic, Mark spat. I don't give a damn about Sarah. This isn't a wedding, Jason. It's a hostile takeover. Her father ruined my family's firm 20 years ago. He took everything from my old man. Today, I'm just taking it back. Once the papers are signed today, I control 51% of their family assets. After that, Sarah can go back to being the lonely little rich girl she always was. I'm taking everything. I stood there in the hallway, clutching the velvet ring box so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart was thumping against my ribs like a trapped animal. In less than 10 minutes, my sister was going to walk down that aisle and hand over her entire life to a predator who wanted to burn our world to the ground. I had no recording, no proof, just my word against the man everyone in that room worshipped. I looked at the gold handle of the door. I had two choices. I could walk away, let the ceremony happen, and watch the trap snap shut, or I could walk in there and start a war. I chose war. I didn't knock. I kicked the door open so hard it hit the wall with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. Mark and Jason jumped, their faces pale. But the second Mark saw it was me, his expression shifted. The panic vanished, replaced by a terrifying, calm mask of arrogance. He slowly turned back to the mirror, adjusting his silk tie as if I wasn't even there. Get out, Jason, Mark said, his voice flat. Jason didn't wait. He scrambled out of the room, keeping his eyes on the floor. I stood there, my chest heaving, the ring box still crushed in my hand. I heard you, I spat. I heard everything. The offshore accounts, the hostile takeover, the revenge. You're not marrying my sister, Mark. I'm going out there right now, and I'm telling everyone. I'm telling Sarah. I'm telling my father. You're done. Mark didn't flinch. He didn't beg. He just picked up his champagne glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. Then he turned to face me. You think you're the hero of this story, don't you? Mark smiled. It was a cold, predatory look that made my skin crawl. You think you're going to walk out there and save the day. But you haven't been paying attention to your own family's business, have you? I took a step toward him, ready to swing, but his next words stopped me cold. Go ahead, Mark said, leaning against the mahogany desk. Tell Sarah. Break her heart on the biggest day of her life. But before you do, you should ask your father about the Blackwood Logistics files. You know, the ones buried in the 2018 audits. My heart skipped a beat. Blackwood. It was a shell company my father used during the recession. I knew it existed, but I never knew the details. I have the original ledgers, Mark whispered, stepping into my personal space. Every illegal offshore transfer, every bribe your father paid to secure the state contracts. If this wedding stops, those files go to the FBI within the hour. Your father won't just be bankrupt, he'll be in a federal prison for the rest of his life. Your family legacy? Gone. Your sister's reputation? Buried. I felt the air leave the room. He had thought of everything. So, here's the deal, Mark said, his face inches from mine. You walk out that door, you hand me those rings, and you stand there like a good little brother while I marry Sarah. She gets a husband she loves, and your father stays out of prison. Everyone wins. Or, you start a war you've already lost. I looked at the rings. I looked at the man who was about to destroy us from the inside. The music started playing from the courtyard, the signal that the ceremony was beginning. The music from the courtyard grew louder, a hauntingly beautiful string quartet playing Sarah's favorite song. To the guests outside, it was a signal of love. To me, it sounded like a funeral march for our family. Mark gave me one last smirk, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my pulse thundering in my ears. I had exactly 6 minutes before the procession started. 6 minutes to find something, anything, that could neutralize the blackmail he had on my father. I started tearing the suite apart. I checked the pockets of his discarded suit jacket. Nothing. I checked the mahogany desk. Empty. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the drawer handles. I felt like a thief in my own home, but the real thief was currently walking toward the altar to steal our entire legacy. Then I saw it. Mark's personal phone was sitting face down on the vanity, right next to a bottle of expensive cologne. He had left it behind. Probably because he was so arrogant, so sure of his victory, that he didn't think I had the guts to touch it. The phone was locked with a passcode. I tried Sarah's birthday. Wrong. I tried their anniversary. Wrong. I had 2 attempts left before the device locked me out. My mind raced. What would a man like Mark use? I looked at the vintage photo of his father on the desk, the man my father had supposedly ruined. I tried the date on the back of the frame. The screen swiped open. I didn't have time to look through photos. I went straight to his messages. There was a contact at the top with no name, just an encrypted string of numbers. I opened it and my heart stopped. The papers are in the briefcase. The moment the officiant says, husband and wife, the transfer trigger is active. My father is waiting for the signal. The reply came a second later, perfect. Once the Blackwood files are leaked to the SEC, the company will plummet. We buy the remaining shares for pennies. Sarah gets nothing. You get the revenge, I get the empire. The contact wasn't just some random accomplice. I recognized the profile picture. It was Vanessa Thorne, the daughter of my father's biggest business rival. The woman who had been trying to bankrupt us for a decade. Mark wasn't just acting out of a grudge. He had sold us out to the enemy. He was a double agent, and Sarah was nothing more than the Trojan horse he was using to get through the gates. I didn't just have proof of his lie, I had proof of a corporate conspiracy. But the clock was at 0. The wedding march started. Sarah was walking. I burst through the back doors of the chapel just as Sarah reached the altar. The sun was streaming through the stained glass, making her look like a saint. She reached out and took Mark's hand, her eyes shimmering with tears of pure joy. She had no idea she was shaking hands with the man who had a knife aimed at our family's throat. I stood at the back, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would burst. I looked at my father in the front row. He looked so proud, so relieved. If I spoke, I was sending him to a federal prison. If I stayed silent, I was condemning my sister to a life of psychological torture and financial ruin. Mark looked back at me over his shoulder. It was subtle, just a flicker of a glance, but I saw the smirk. He thought he'd won. He thought the Blackwood threat had neutered me. He was standing there, in front of God and 300 guests, waiting for the trap to snap shut. The officiant's voice echoed through the silent hall. If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now, or forever hold your peace. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the wind rustling the flowers outside. I could hear the tick of my own watch. I looked at Sarah. She was looking at Mark like he was her entire world. And then I looked at the phone in my hand, the evidence of the conspiracy with Vanessa Thorne. Mark didn't just want our money, he wanted our blood. My father's freedom was a high price. But my sister's soul was higher. Stop! The word ripped out of my throat before I could even think. The entire room turned. 300 heads snapped toward the back of the hall. Sarah's face paled. My father's jaw dropped. But Mark? Mark just narrowed his eyes. He didn't look surprised. He looked ready. "This wedding is over," I shouted, my voice echoing off the stone walls. "And Mark, you're not going anywhere." The chapel exploded into chaos. My father stood up, his face a mask of fury and confusion. Sarah began to tremble, her bouquet slipping from her hands and scattering white petals across the floor like drops of snow. Mark, ever the actor, stepped toward her, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Sarah, honey, ignore him," Mark pleaded, his eyes wide and innocent. "He's having some kind of breakdown. I'm so sorry, everyone. We'll get him some help. He was good." For a second, even the guests started whispering that I'd lost my mind. But I didn't say a word. I just walked up to the altar and plugged Mark's phone into the sound system the quartet had been using. The audio of his conversation with Jason, the part where he called my sister a paycheck and a hostile takeover, blasted through the chapel. Then I pulled up the encrypted messages from Vanessa Thorne. The betrayal was laid bare in high-definition sound and text. The silence that followed was heavier than the music. Sarah didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked at Mark, saw the mask finally slip from his face, and delivered a slap that echoed through the entire building. She walked away without a single word, leaving him standing alone in a room full of people who now knew exactly what he was. The wedding was over, but the war had just begun. Mark was escorted out by security, but as he passed me, he leaned in and whispered something I'll never forget. "You saved the company, little brother. But did you check the Blackwood files?" Later that night, I went to my father's office. I found the files Mark had mentioned. I expected to find proof of my father's crimes. Instead, I found something worse. My father hadn't ruined Mark's family. They had been partners. The shell company, Blackwood, wasn't for bribes. It was a life insurance policy. My father had been paying Mark's family off for 20 years to keep them quiet about a tragedy they had all caused together. The revenge Mark wanted wasn't just for money. It was because he knew the truth. My father was the reason Mark's father was dead. I sat in the dark office, the silence of the empty estate ringing in my ears. I had saved my sister from a monster, only to realize we were the ones who created him. Sarah is gone now. She left the country to clear her head. My father is waiting for the legal fallout. And me? I'm still looking at the rings. Mark didn't lose today. He just moved the war from the altar to our own home.